ॐ भूर्भुवस्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्.
Okay, now we would continue from the next, past lecture about checked exceptions. In the last class, we saw that what do you mean by checked exception? An exception which is supposed to be thrown out of the system or thrown out of your method, or which is supposed to be caught, is called as a checked exception. Checked exception is always checked at the compile time. Okay, so now I hope that all of you can given you an exception, all of you can make a difference or can recognize that whether this is a checked exception or whether this is a unchecked exception. The one rule or the one test for that is, and if an exception is derived from runtime, it is a runtime exception. If an exception is not derived from the runtime, okay, it is called or it is termed as a checked exception. Let's see that in the API. Now, in the last class, we saw that we are getting an exception called as find not found exception, which they told us either you catch it or you throw it out of the system. So we will go to the API and check whether this file API really is a checked exception or it is an unchecked exception. So now, if you click on this file not found exception, so what it is telling you, find not found exception is derived from IO exception, which is directly getting derived from exception. There is no runtime exception class over here, which tells you that, or which explains you that find not found exception is of type checked exception. Now, in the earlier class, what did we do? We first of all caught this exception. Because we provided a try and a catch, or we provided the mechanism to catch this particular exception, we were able to compile our application, and now we would run that application. Can you compile it once more? We can show them the edit class. Okay, we have compiled it, and now we will try and run it. So Java checked exception. Now just look at it. What did we do? We got an exception. Why is this getting printed? Because in our catch block, if you go to edit class, come down, show them the catch block. In our catch block, we have written e.print stack trace. Tell us why did this error had come, what is the history of this error and all that stuff. So what happened? Over here, file object got created. I asked that whether this particular file exists or it does not exist. Now we know that we did not create this file called as abc.txt, but we are creating a reader for this file. The file is not there, but we are saying that we want to read the file. It's just like the film is not released or the script is not finalized and the person is going and telling I am the hero of this movie. Okay, it's same as that. So now we are creating a file input stream without having the file object. So I told you that whenever a file is not present, your file input stream will throw an error and it will shout at you that, hey boss, your file is not there and you are creating me. This is not correct at all. Okay, so now if you go back and look at the exception, it gave me an exception. He's saying the system cannot find the file specified. Okay, I am not able to locate the file which you had said. Now, why was I able to catch this exception or to print this exception? Because I was providing the mechanism that if an exception occurs, suppose if the constructor does not find that file, I should be able to catch that exception. Now, what we would do is, we would create a file abc.txt. Now we are even providing the script we are financing the movie, and then we are going to say, now I am going to sign you as an actor. So now let's create a file abc.txt. Just write anything over here. This is a beautiful morning, or whatever. Hello, welcome to exception handling. Fine. Now save this as abc.txt. So we are writing abc.txt. Save. Now, do we have a file called as abc.txt? Yes. So f.exist is going to print you true, and we will create a file input stream. Go back to the program, and here just write system.out.println after this. System.out.println, because they won't come to know whether the object got created or not. Print the object. FIS, say FIS. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so I'm just printing it. Earlier, this line would not get printed only because the exception was getting thrown at line number 16. So it would not go at 17 at all. Now we have provided abc.txt, and we are printing system.out.println. Go back. And now compile. Compile. It's going to get compiled nicely. Run. It's going to get run. And now your file does exist, and this is your file input stream got created. Okay. Now many of us get confused in this. They say you had try and catch na, and the file was not there, so it is fine. Your system got compiled nicely. Now the file is there. If we remove try and catch block, okay, just remove the try and catch. Remove try and catch. Remove it here. Delete it completely. Now we know that the file is also there, and we are going to create a file input stream also. Now if I try to compile this application, will it get compiled? Let's have it. I say java checked exception.java. It did not get compiled. Why? Because there is one line called as file input stream equal to new file input stream, which is saying C was at the compilation time, I do not know whether abc.txt exists or it does not exist. So if it does not exist, what should I do? If it exists, it's fine. If it does not exist, then what should I do? Should I report this to my main, or should I catch it within myself? I have to tell my file input stream what it has to do. Okay, so now over here, this particular exception is a checked exception thrown by file input stream constructor. I should either throw it from my method or catch it. Earlier, what did we do? We caught it in our class. Now what are we going to do? We are going to throw it. Okay, go to your edit class and say that static void main m1 throws file not found exception. Throws file not found exception. So I am saying that, see boss, even if the file is not there, I don't care about it. If the file is not there and you are going to throw an exception, then please, I am not going to handle this exception. I am also going to throw this exception from M1. Okay? And now when M1 is throwing the exception, where would the exception go? Exception would go to the callee. Who is the callee over here? Your main is the callee. Okay? So now I am also declaring that I am not going to catch this, I am going to throw it. So before you go to your compile this application now. So now earlier I was getting an exception. See boss, you did not provide any mechanism for the checked exception. Now I adopted the mechanism of throwing it out of my method. So I use the keyword throws. Okay, throws means you are throwing the exception out of your method. So when do you use throws? This is very, very important, and this question might come in your exam. Okay, why do you use throws, or when do you use throws, or why do people use throws? when you are creating or dealing with checked exception. Whenever you use a method which is throwing a checked exception, either your application should throw the exception out of the class or it should catch it. In order that you propagate the checked exception to the callee, you will declare this particular propagation with the help of throws keyword. Okay, so throws keyword is often used to throw the exception. Don't say only exception. Always use the checked exception. So throws keyword is always used in order to throw the checked exception out of your system and propagate to its callee. Okay, so now if we compile the application is going to get compiled. Okay, now it is not compiling also. It is saying that, see boss, this M1 is throwing the error. Go to edit plus. Okay, now M1 is saying if suppose if abc.txt is there, this exception would not come. But suppose if abc.txt is not there, I am not going to handle this exception, Baba. I am going to give it to main. I am going to throw this exception out of my method. Now, I am throwing this exception to main. Now, main will say, Arey baap, hey. Now, he is throwing the checked exception at me. Either I should throw it out of my system and give it to the JVM back, or I should provide a try and a catch block. Okay, now it depends on the main whether it will throw it or it will catch it. Okay, so I'm going to say throws over here also. Throws find not found exception. That means whenever an exception occurs and if main is notified, main will say, hey Baba, I am not going to handle this exception. I am going to throw it and the program will explode or it will hang or it will stop its execution. Now I will compile my application and check whether it gets compiled or it does not get compiled. It got compiled because now the exception or the checked exception which was thrown out of M1 is thrown out of main also. So whenever you are dealing with checked exception, make it a point, either it should be caught or it should be declared to throw. Okay? And please don't get confused. It's throws. Throws means you are throwing the exception out of your method. Now, run this application. It got run successfully. Now what we will do, we will delete the abc.txt and see what happens. Now abc.txt was there, it is checking, yes, the file is there. Create a file input stream, yes, create a file input stream. Now we will delete that particular abc.txt. Go to the folder and delete it. Okay, that's fine. So he deleted the abc.txt. Now we will run our application again. Now see what would happen. I am trying to create a file input stream, but that file does not exist only. So your constructor is going to throw an error. Okay. Now when it throws an error, it is going to check the definition of M1. Oh boss, this person is not catching me, but he is throwing me again. Okay. So the moment he looks at the exception, who is looking at the exception? Your JVM. Exception got created. It gave the exception to M1. M1 will check. The exception comes in M1. Now, there is nobody to handle the exception. I will look at the definition of M1 and see, arey boss, this is not handling me, but this is throwing me again. Because it says M1 throws file not found exception. So I will go to the callee. I will check the definition of callee. Okay. Now again the callee is not catching the exception. It is also throwing. Main is saying main throws file not found exception. So again the exception is going to be thrown out of the main, and now the program is going to explode and your execution will halt at that particular line. What is happening? Hello world got printed? Printed. This got printed? Yes. Now there was an exception. It could not handle the exception and that is why your main program exploded and that your FIS did not get printed or the object only did not get created because the file was not there. Is it clear? So whenever you are dealing with checked exceptions, people often get confused. They say that, okay, if I am dealing with checked exception, if I say throws, the exception will occur. It is not that. Exception can occur or exception cannot occur. If exception is not occurring, your program will happen. Your program will execute as it is supposed to get executed. But if an exception occurs, depending on what exception mechanism you have provided in Java, either you are throwing it, you want the exception to propagate, or you are catching it, it is going to function. Okay, so remember this very clearly, that whenever you are talking about checked exceptions, you throw them or you catch them. This is all with your throws definition and your checked and your unchecked exception. Now, we will move forward and understand what all we have in exception, what else is left in our exception handling. Now suppose I am creating an application, okay, of a florist application, okay. In that application, what do we have? We have a flower shop. I am a florist, I am sending flowers, I am selling flowers, okay. Now a customer comes to me and tells me that I have got only 3 varieties, rose, lily and jasmine. He comes to me and he asks me, or he enters into my system that he wants tulip. Now I will check in my store that do I have tulip or I don't have tulip. If I don't have a tulip flower, then what I need to do? I need to throw an exception. Now which exception would I throw? Would I throw a file not found exception, or would I throw a number format exception, or would I throw a array index out of bound exception? What kind of an exception should I throw so that the person who's entering the name of the flower should understand that, see boss, the flower is not there. What should I do? I don't have any exception in Java which is saying flower not found exception. Okay, and I want to throw a flower not found exception so that the user understands that the flower is not there. What do I do? In many applications or in many cases, you will have to create a user defined exception. You have to create your own exception class and say that this is a particular exception which you created. Now our agenda is to create a florist and to create an application which is going to check whether the person who has entered the name of the flower is there in the store or not. If it is not there in the store, we are supposed to throw an error at that particular person. Now, before we begin, the first requirement is we should create that user defined exception. After creating it only, we will throw it, right? So first of all, we need to create a user defined exception. And the name of the exception or the name of our exception would be flower not found exception. So let's create a new Java class. Okay, we would say class flower not found exception. Flower not found exception. Now in this application, you have created a class, but in order that your class becomes an exception class, what you need to do? You need to create or you need to extend it from an exception class. Extend exception. Now here also, you have to think when you are doing it. What kind of exception do you want flower not found to be? You want to be a runtime exception. Okay? So now, instead of only extending it from an exception class, I would say flower not found exception should be a runtime exception, or it should be an unchecked exception. So I will say flower not found extends runtime exception, not only exception. So the moment I am saying it is extending from runtime, it becomes my unchecked exception. Okay. This is only what I want to print. Nothing else. Let the class be empty. Okay. Now save this. Now I have to create an application where I am going to check whether the person has entered a name is there in my store, blah 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 or not. So let's create a new class. See, only this you need to do. Give the name of the class extends from runtime exception. Your exception class is created. This is how you create an exception. Okay, that's it. Very plain and simple. Okay, we'll go to the new class, our florist application. Class florist. IST. Good. Okay. Now in this class, we will declare an array. Okay, a string array. Okay, string array which consists of the names of all the flowers. So we have rose, okay, and we have got lily, and we have got jasmine. That's it. Fine. Now, in the next line, we will check whether the person who has entered the name of the flower, do we have the name in the list or not? Okay. So just declare a boolean variable found. Boolean found equal to false. Okay. Now in a for loop, int I equals 0, int I less than a dot length, I plus plus. You are going to iterate through an array and check whether the name entered is equal to the name mentioned in my array or not. So in your for, give braces into the body of for, not write in if a dot I, sorry, a of I dot equals. Now what should we use? Should we use only equals or should we use equals ignore case? We should go for equals ignore case because we don't know how the user is going to enter the data. Okay. Equals ignore case arg0. Whatever we are passing the argument as. Okay. Now if a of I is equal to that, then we will make the found as true. Then we will make it as true. Okay. Now after for, write again an if condition. If found only because it's a boolean, right? If it is true, write system.out.println flower found. Else flower not found. Flower found. Else flower not found. Okay, so now let's compile this. And name it as florist.java. Excellent. Yeah. Let's compile both of them. Our flower not found also, and our flower not found exception also, and our florist also. Okay, it should be args, I guess. ARGS. Yeah. Fine. Okay, give the name. Give anything. Give anything. Red rose. Flower not found. But now, instead of printing your system.out.println, what I need to do? I need to throw an exception. And I want to give an exception that, see boss, your flower was not found. Okay? How do we do this? Go back to your edit class. Okay? Now, instead of printing this line, flower not found, I want to throw an exception to the runtime system and tell them that, see boss, no flower was found, so I am throwing an exception. Do we have an exception found? Yes, we do have. Now what we need to do? Just like your JVM is creating an object and throwing at the runtime system, we will create an object of flower not found and throw it to our JVM. So instead of writing the 15th line, okay, we are going to say throw a new object of flower not found exception. Flower not found exception. So throw keyword is used when you deliberately want to throw an exception if a condition is not satisfied. Now this exception can be anything. It can be either a user defined exception or it can be an exception from your library. Instead of having flower not found exception, I can even throw an arithmetic exception. It all depends what exception you want to throw. So whenever you are using this throw keyword, you are supposed to throw an object of the exception. You have to create an object of exception class and throw it. When do you use it? You use it when a condition is not fulfilled and you want to notify to the user that, see boss, the condition is not fulfilled and I want to throw an exception. And when you want to deliberately throw an exception, you are going to use this throw keyword. Okay, now compile this. Compile your florist.java. Okay, and run this. Now again, florist. Okay, now again we are asking for notice. Do we have notice? No. So it should throw an exception. Now what is he saying? Earlier we were writing system.out.println, but now he is saying exception in thread mail, flower not found exception. Doesn't this exception look like all other exceptions of yours, like your arithmetic exception or array index out of bound or your number format exception? It does look like that, right? So now go back. We are throwing this particular exception. Now suppose you don't want to throw a flower not found exception and you want to throw an arithmetic exception over here. Is it possible? Yes, it is. Just throw arithmetic exception. Arithmetic. Again, it's not true. Arithmetic. Now, so if our condition is not satisfied, again say notice. It's saying I am throwing an arithmetic exception. So it depends on what do you want to throw. Whenever any condition or whenever any user defined condition is not satisfied and you want to notify the user by throwing an exception towards the user, then you are going to use your throw keyword. Or if you just want to throw an exception, you can use your throw keyword anywhere you want. Okay. Now give a correct thing. Just give Java rows, Java florist rows. Or you just work whether it works correctly or not. Flower found. So if you are specifying a flower which is in the list, your flower is found. If you are giving a flower which is not there in your list, I am throwing an error. Now go to flower not found exception. From arithmetic we will change back to flower not found exception. In your florist.java, instead of throwing arithmetic exception, we will say flower not found exception. Now here, what I want to do is, if anybody is invoking a get message on my class, okay, you must have seen that in our catch blocks, either we are saying print stack trace or we are saying get message on a particular exception object. Whenever anybody prints get message, I want to print sorry boss, flower was not in the store. In order to do this, what I need to do? I need to override my get message method in my base class. Okay, so I will go to my flower not found exception over here. Okay, and I would write public void get message. Not, it would be string, I guess, because it returns a string. So instead of void, a string would be here. Just if you guys want to check it with the signature, go in your exception class and check it with the signature. You can go to the exception class, and in this you can check the signature of your get message method. Go to methods, get message, click over here. It is so public string get message. This is nothing but the signature of my method. So I need to override this. Okay, so I am saying now I am going to return. No, not write system. Return. Okay. Sorry, not in the store. Sorry, the flower is not in the store. Is not in the store. Okay. So now go to your florist. What are we doing over here? We are just throwing an exception. Okay. So whenever that condition is not satisfied, an exception is thrown. But are we catching this exception? We are not catching this exception. An exception is thrown, and because the exception is thrown, my execution of the program stops. If I don't want the execution to stop, again I have to put this in try and a catch block. Okay? And if I am putting a try and a catch, in the catch block I am going to print the get message. So put this condition or put your if, this entire thing in your try and a catch. So I know that this particular piece is throwing an exception. I want to apply exception handling also on that piece of code. So I am going to put that into try and catch. So what would happen? The moment you throw an exception at your runtime system, an exception is going to, your runtime system is going to check whether I have a try and a catch block for this flower not found exception. Will I get a catch block? Yes, I will get a catch block. Then I will execute this particular catch block. Now just write system.out.println fnfe dot get message. Fnfe dot get message. Now which message is going to get printed? The one we have just overridden. So you can please compile it. Compile your florist and your flower not found exception, both of them. Florist.java and flower not found exception.java and run your florist. So at one condition, I am throwing an exception also and I am catching an exception also. Okay? So I am going to give lotus. Exception must have gone. I would have come back and checked whether I have a catch block. Did I find a catch block? Yes. And I executed what? System.out.println. Please get me the message which is there in my exception, flower not found exception. And I printed this message. Okay. Now, the very important or a very recurring question would be, what is the difference between your throw and throws? Please do not get confused between the two. A throw keyword is always used when you want to throw an exception deliberately, okay, at the program. Whenever the condition is not satisfied and if the programmer thinks that the error should be thrown to the system, at that time he is going to use a throw keyword. You have to throw an object of the exception. You can't create or you can't just say throw and throw anything. You have to create an object of exception class and throw it. So whenever you use throw, you are always supposed to throw an exception, and throw should only be used when you are throwing the exception in your application. Okay? Throws keyword is always used when you are dealing with checked exceptions and you don't want to handle the exception and you want that the exception should propagate to the poly. At that time you are going to use throws. So just keep this thing in mind. Throws used for exception. exception propagation. In case of checked exceptions, throw keyword is used in order to throw the exception deliberately at the system. Now, whenever you are using throw, it can either be a checked exception or it can be your unchecked exception. But whenever you are talking about throws, you will only throw checked exceptions out of the system and make those checked exceptions propagate. Okay, so I hope your exception handling is as clear as a crystal. Okay, now we were talking about try and catches. Okay, that one try should have one catch or multiple catches. One catch should always have one try accompanied with it. We also saw how tries are nested within each other. Now, one very important thing over here is, suppose this is a try block, this is a catch block, okay? I want to print one line, system.out.println, hello world. Suppose this line is very, very important for me, okay? I am writing system.out.println, hello world. Hello world, okay. Now, I want this line to get printed whether an exception occurs or whether an exception does not occur. So what I need to do? If an exception does not occur, I can write it over here on line number 16, system.out.println hello world. What if an exception occurs? I have to replicate this particular line and put it in my catch block also. So if I put this line in my catch block, please copy this line number 16 and place it in the catch block. So now I am sure that if an exception occurs, this line is going to get printed. If this exception does not occur, even then the line is going to get printed. Okay. In order to do this, what did I do? I replicated this line in my try block as well as I replicated this line in my catch block. Suppose this was not a line. It was a piece of code. Okay. 7 or 8, this piece of code compromises of 7 or 8 lines. Okay. What I need to do? 7 or 8 lines in the try block, 7 or 8 lines in the catch block. Okay. Because I want them to get executed if an error occurs or if an error does not occur. Okay. Now, what are you doing? Are you harming your program by writing this? Yes, you are. You are replicating your code in the try block. You are replicating in the code in the catch block. Don't do that. Replication of code is very, very bad. But you would say, then what should we do? Even if the error occurs or if the error does not occur, we want to print this particular line of code or we want to execute this particular line of code. So we have to put it in try. We have to put it in catch. Because if an error occurs, it will go to the catch block and execute. So we are putting it in the catch block. Suppose if the error does not occur, it will execute the entire try block. It will never go to the catch block if the error is not occurring. Okay? In that particular case, I have to put that piece of code in the try block also. Okay? Now, what I am going to do is execute this particular thing. Okay? So now I will have an error. I will go to the catch block and print hello world. Javac test1. Test1.java. Printed. So right now I am having an error because I am dividing it by 0. I go to the catch block, execute that line. Okay? Hello world got printed. Now I would go to my application. Go to the application and instead of 0 over here, give 10 or give 2. 4 divided by 2 is better. Give 2. Fine. Now, is there any error to occur? No. So would I go in the catch block? No. But then too I want to print this particular line, hello world. Okay. Go back to your edit command prompt, compile this and run this. Then too my hello world is getting printed. So my mission is accomplished. Error occurs, I print it. Error does not occur, I print it. But I am harming my program by replicating the code. Now, one way around is, go to the edit plus. instead of putting it in try block, again replicating it in catch block, I am going to create or write a block called as finally. Okay? Look how the finally looks like. Finally, braces, end the braces. And I am going to write this line over here. System.out.println, hello world. Delete the line from catch, delete the line from try. Which means finally is going to get called regardless your error is there in the program or it is not there in the program. Finally block will definitely get visited if you are coming out of try or you are coming out of catch. Okay, so whenever you are including finally block, it means that this particular piece of code should get executed after you finish your try or after you finish your catch. So right now in the program, we would come out from where? We would come out from try because we do not have any error over here. So let's see whether finally gets printed or no. No error in the program, you come out of try block. So after you're coming out of try, finally is getting printed. Now instead of 2, we will make it 0 so that an error occurs in the program. Okay, so go to your edit plus. Make this as 0. Make the 2 as 0. Now compile it and run. Hello world, and finally. You are coming out of catch and your finally is getting executed. So, what all things would you place in your finally block? All the common code which needs to get executed if you are coming out from try or if you are coming out from catch should be placed in your finally method. Okay? Oh, sorry, finally block. Go back to edit plus. Now I would remove my catch. Remove the catch. Delete it. Is this a logic syntax? Just look at the syntax. Go up. I have my try, but it does not have a catch. It directly has a finally. Will this application compile? Let's compile it and see. Sorry, compile it, no? Yeah, don't run the application, only compile it. Was it getting compiled? Yes, it was getting compiled. But you will say, earlier ma'am, you told us, a try should be there with a catch. There is an exception to this rule. It says that a try needs to be accompanied with either catch or finally. Okay? So, in case if you don't want to have your catch, if you want to only have your finally, it is acceptable. So a try should always be accompanied. Go to edit plus. A try will always be accompanied with either finally or catch or with both. Okay? And when finally is getting called, you come out from try, finally gets called. You come out from catch, your finally gets called. Okay, so all the common code which needs to get executed should be placed in your finally method. No, that would be all for today.